Welcome to Have a Happy Arty Time. My name's Janette and I'm going to be showing you how I go about making pieces for my collages. Now I have some lovely soft foam stamps that I've made up, and also I've collected the little tops off the paint, and that makes a nice pattern as well. So I'm going to be using this very cheap greaseproof paper, as you've probably seen before in some of my videos. I do all sorts of things with this, and this is one way I like to use it to make pieces for my collages. And I'm also going to be using these paint brushes to simply paint on my jelly plate. Just adding a little bit of water to some black paint that I've placed in here. And I'm just going to paint on some designs. Just nice and quick, not thinking too much. Don't want anything too perfect. Okay, and we'll just pull this before it dries. There we go. And oftentimes we can do a second pull with this. And there we go again. We might even be able to get a lighter pull here as well. And there we have a little bit of design work that we can use later in our collages. I always add a little bit of water to my paint. You may prefer it thicker, so please go ahead and do whatever you would like that suits your artwork. So I have a couple of thin paint brushes here, and I'm just going to get a little bit of paint, do some whiskey lines, just see how that's going to go. I work fairly quickly when doing this, as the paint still tends to dry. So I know I need a few little crosses. Okay. So we're getting some nice marks here on our paper. So I'm going to put that one aside and continue on, and we'll get some of these stamps going. So I know I'm going to be needing some of this, so I'm going to pour some paint onto this other jelly plate, roll a little bit of black out here, and just roll this onto here, and I'm going to stamp my jelly plate. But I'm loving this, it's just beautiful. And you'll see me in my next video use this stamped collage piece here in my beautiful collage flowers. Okay. So I'm getting some lovely grungy marks. You can just stamp them on your sheet as well. You don't need a jelly plate to do this. However, I really do love using them this way. This is our bottle lids from our paints. Now you'll notice I'm not being very precise with these, and that's because my fodder material is really quite grungy, and that's how I like to use it, so that it doesn't detract from the main collaged piece. I also like to decorate on top of my collage fodder to make them a little bit more interesting at times, or to knock the colour back, all sorts of different reasons, and you'll see that as I go through some of my collage videos. So when I just want some shapes, I make them up of some offcuts from the soft foam stamps, and I just stick them on. I haven't put my piece of masking tape on the back this time. I've added a bit of sticky tape. Works very similar. So I'm just going to run that over and see what we get. The great thing about the baking paper is that when you go to apply this to your collage, it actually glues on and becomes transparent. Occasionally you see a tiny pale effect from the paper, but it just adds to the beauty of your collage. Just loving these. Now, one of my favourite things to do is to add some watercolour onto the jelly plate and just pull up the splashes and the bits that are left behind and all sorts of different things. So I'll show you how I do that as well. Get that on here. And all I do is I just start pressing down and I get these great areas that I can place transparently into my collage. And I'll just show you some of the ones I have made up, and you can see these lovely ink splashes. I just absolutely adore them. Bits and pieces, all sorts of marks. They just come in so handy. This is the wet watercolor again. This is a little bit of acrylic paint that was done very similar. You can see some more here, very diluted piece. Now we're getting into it. Some really grungy splashes, and all just made so quickly on a jelly plate. And of course, rolling it out with the roller with some water on the watercolor gives us this gorgeous marks. Beautiful. Even something as grungy as this can find its way into one of my collages. Okay, now just using the back of a pen. Any pen usually has the same or similar backing that's flat. And I'm just going to add some marks here now. Just beautiful. Turn this around. Great, look at all this, it's just awesome. Okay, we'll put that up to dry. So just giving this a try now, the actual pen area, to get some smaller dots. They're just very gently on the jelly plate because we don't want to poke a hole in or anything. So it bounces back quite nicely. Love all these circle shapes. Okay, wipe my pen clean, or somewhat clean. Let's pull this. Just great. Come down here a little. Another lot of little squares. Right, now I'm going to move on to the paper masks that I've made to create patterns. I use these quite often in my work and they are just so simple. So you can see this one here cut out. This one here was used. I just had this folded into pieces and got my hole punch and punched holes in it. And here we have this one here. So I'll show you just quickly how to make one of these, and then you know that you do very similar to make all the ones that I've made here. I also just have some bits and pieces that I've cut out that you can see a little bit smaller, and I've used them a lot. Once the acrylic paint goes on them, it strengthens them beautifully. Now you can make these out of magazines as well. The shiny, thicker, glossy pages, they work really well and they last very well. So I have my A4 sheet of paper here and I'm just going to fold it in half. And I'm going to fold it in half again. And I'm going to fold it in half again. Now I really love this square shaped one and I can see that it's just starting to rip a little. So I'm going to endeavour to do something like this. So I get my pair of scissors and I'm just going to cut half shapes. Now you can draw on it if you like. That probably makes it a little simpler. So I know I'm going to want to cut shapes like this, and then bigger shapes and smaller shapes, squarer shapes, small, long, all different types of rectangle shapes in this one, and squares. So if I make all my cuts this way first, It makes the process just a little bit quicker. Just have a play around with this. It's just paper and it's so much fun. You can't do anything wrong, and who knows, you may come up with some fantastic new design that no one has ever seen. Then I just turn my scissors, cut down. There we go. So let's see what we got as we unfold this. Got some nice squares, different shapes, different bits and pieces. Just beautiful. And how simple is that? Now what I do is I usually leave it under a heavy book for a while just to straighten those pieces out. But I'm going to use this one on the jelly plate to show you now how it goes. So I've got my paper here that we just made, and I'm going to pop that down, and just starting from the center, press it out and give it a little roll so that it connects nicely with the jelly plate underneath. So I'm just going to put some there. Now you can see that copy paper getting very wet and buckly. Now this is the part where we very gently start to lift that back. Now you will find it wanting to rip, and it will rip in some parts. We can leave that dry a little bit longer on the jelly plate to give us a little bit more success at pulling them off. But if we're just careful, I think we'll be able to get it off in one piece. Okay, so we've got a couple of rips there, but I'll fix those, and I'm going to lay it down flat over on my other workbench. Then I'm going to get my other one that has already been made, and I'm going to pop that down just off center a little bit to what we had there. And I'll use a little bit darker purple. Wonderful, and I'm just going to see if I can lay that down quickly. Give a little roll here and get some of those marks on my paper. Take that out without it sticking. That's great. Move that across and just do this little edge as well. Don't want it to attach itself there, so wonderful. Now I've got both the front and the back covered with acrylic paint, and that will simply be able to be used next time round. Now there's a little area here that I'd like to wipe off just to make that look a little bit more back to being a rectangle. And I'm going to put that on that same print, which is still very wet. We may not have success. I should have let it dry, but we're going to give it a go anyway and see what happens. Nothing like experimenting. We've got this, and we also have our wonderful roll-off sheet, which I'm just loving. So I'm going to place these aside, and when we're using our greaseproof paper, it's the same process. So I'm just going to lay this down, see if we can get some more of that up. And we've got some lovely marks there. And I'm going to get some red to add to this. I'll just put a little bit on my jelly plate over here, as I want to add some dots and dashes to this as well. So I'm going to add the back of my pen and just make some lovely red marks in amongst here. Place that little bit down here. I'm going to do the same down on this side. I'm pulling that back. Wonderful. So we have some red and purple there, folks. I'm thinking I might even try to pick up some of that red on top of here as well. It's just great. I love how this gives you so many surprises. So there we go. That's starting to look really neat. Okay, so that'll be great. And I just want to add a little bit of green here. So I'm going to put it over on the side as well. Get a little bit in and just give some strange squiggles here and there. Some will be fat, some will be thin. And here we go, very nice. That's going to look beautiful. And even back on these black lines, I'm just going to use some of the colour. Use up the rest of this paint. And I can see here now that we've got all bits and pieces of colour. So I'm just going to add another mask on here that I've used, and I'm going to place that down here. And I just want to bring in some of that red. Now I'm going to let this one dry, and then I'm going to put some white on this and see if we can pull the whole lot and just see what it looks like. Adding the white paint. So I need to let this dry. I have way too much paint on it, so we'll see how this one goes. So I'm back with this jelly print ready to pull. It's been down on the jelly plate for over an hour now, drying fully, and I'm not sure how we're going to go. I think it's fairly stuck, but it feels quite dry, which is good. And I'm just going to pull this. So we can see that that has worked. Now it looks pretty messy. That was just getting all the grunge up off the plate. It's great to know we've learnt something together, that we can actually leave the wax paper on the jelly plate and let it actually dry. As I say, it's been there for over an hour. Now, some of the cardboard cutouts and things that you can make are quite elaborate, and I'm just going to show you the basics. I've got a little cutout here that was off a box from the fruit and veggie place, and we're using the ribbed cardboard, and I was able just to get my cutting knife and just cut the first layer and peel those off just to make a little bit of a design. And then of course we have the fatter pieces here, and all we do is take our piece of cardboard and just with a pen or a pencil just press down fairly firmly till the paper rips in between each rib. And then we just take this and we grab one side of the rib and we just lift it up with our finger, or fingernail I should say, just pulling that back, loosening it on top now on that side. Then I just like to turn it over and pull back on the other side, and we're left with this lovely ribbed area. So this is going to give us some nice marks as well. And I had a piece here that I was using that was the same shape as that, just a rectangle, and I've decided to cut some circle pieces. So I just went around my tape, and so I just took my scissors to cut that out, and I'm going to add some tape. Okay, so I'll be able to do that. And I'm just thinking I was actually going to cut the center out of that. So I have my small cutting mat, and I'll just do that. So we'll have a look at some of the marks we can make from this, and then that'll finish off this video. I'll go through what we've made, and I will be back with my first collage video for you. Just going to add a little tag on this one. Okay, so I'm going to use some gold paint. Just work this around. It's going to work in so many collages, I'm loving it. And we'll go again. Now I have a background that I think this would look beautiful over the top of. It's on the baking paper. And sometimes it's just that extra hint of colour that we'll be able to use and make something look really beautiful. Okay, put that aside, and I'm going to use a little bit of purple. Get our sheet. Some lovely grungy, very grungy marks that I will be able to use transparently over some other things as I collage that on. Alrighty, so I'm just going to put some gold over the whole thing, and leave some baking paper or grease paper, on there, let it dry and come back to it in a few hours and see if it will clean my plate again. That'll be wonderful. Okay, back now to pull this last print. This has been sitting overnight on the jelly plate. And it's done a marvellous job. Jelly plate all clean, and I also get some of these gorgeous marks on top of the gold, which is just what I needed for another project. And as I said, I would show you just through before I finish the video the ones that we made today. So we've got some lovely bits and pieces that we'll be able to use. This was a clean off sheet as well. I still might be able to use that, and going into just copy paper. So just to flip through, love these marks. All these marks are great for everything that I need to do. Of course, make your own marks, your own stamps, everything. It's just great to have all of this on hand when you're making collages. So we have lots of bits and pieces to use in our collages, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video where I'm going to make some collage flowers. So thank you very, very much for being with me. I hope you've had a happy arty time. Stay safe. Bye for now.